Hey ladies, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. In case we haven't met before, I'm Shannon, and I just want to start off by saying thank you to everyone who subscribed after that last video. You guys are awesome. Today we'll be talking about a question I get all the time, and that is home birth safe? The first time I interact with most of my clients, they've already done their research. They've weighed the risks and the benefits and decided that home birth is right for them. So this question doesn't come from them. For me, many times it comes from an acquaintance the first time they find out what I do. For you, it comes from concerned friends and family members once you've announced you'd like to have a home birth. It comes from a partner, a parent, or a friend who had a really hard hospital birth and can't imagine anyone ever doing it naturally. All of these people are concerned, and that's understandable. In the United States, 99% of births take place in a hospital. Over 50% of births have taken place there since the 1940s. So the women that are giving birth now are essentially 2 generations separated from when home birth was considered normal. In order to address the question of home birth safety, we're going to look at 2 studies. These are the 2 most cited studies in the home birth safety debate. The first one is referred to as the MANA study and is favored by home birth advocates. The second is the WAC study and is favored by home birth critics. A comparison of these studies is important because they both focus on the intended delivery location. That's the key. There are many studies out there that simply compare home birth to hospital birth. But is a high-risk mother who accidentally delivers at home without any trained help similar to a low-risk mother who planned to have a home birth with a midwife? Most studies would group these women together. They both had a home birth. And while that's technically correct, it's also a bit misleading. I have to warn you, the information in this video is a bit technical, but don't worry, I'll break everything down and we'll go through it together. And it took me a couple times to shoot this, so if it takes you a couple times to watch it, you'll be in good company. Before we start, I need to define 4 terms that you might be unfamiliar with: intrapartum or perinatal, neonatal, and non-anomalous. Technically, intrapartum and perinatal are not the same thing, but one study uses them interchangeably. So in this comparison, both intrapartum and perinatal are used to indicate the time frame between when labor has started and delivery. Neonatal is much simpler. Neonatal is defined as the first 27 days of life. Non-anomalous is also simple. It just means without anomalies. So in our case, it refers to infants who are born without an inherent issue that might be life-threatening, such as a heart defect. I'm going to list these definitions, the studies, and other resources below, so that at the end of this, you can go and do your own research. If this video is part of your research into deciding whether home birth is right for you, then that's great. Congratulations on your pregnancy, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. The MANA study was published in 2014 in the Journal of Midwifery and Women's Health. MANA stands for the Midwives Alliance of North America. The study was done using data from the MANA Statistics Project. This study looked at results from almost 17,000 planned home births between 2004 and 2009. As a disclaimer, I'm not at all associated with this study, but I do have recent experience entering MANA stats, and because of that, I wanted to give you an overview on how MANA stats work. Many times, when a mom starts care with a licensed midwife, they authorize us to disclose non-identifying information about their pregnancy and birth to MANA. MANA gathers this information for research purposes and studies just like this one. And their statistics are very thorough. MANA wants to know everything. In this study alone, they collected data on almost 200 variables. Also, you cannot start a client in MANA stats and then not finish their statistics because they might be unfavorable. In other words, you can't exclude a birth just because it had a poor outcome. So the information is thorough and includes outcomes that might otherwise be excluded due to bias. The healthcare providers in this study held different credentials, including certified nurse midwives and even unlicensed midwives. But approximately 80% of these births were attended by a certified professional midwife. Of the women attempting a home birth, 78% had given birth before, and the majority of women paid out of pocket for their home birth. The study states that failure to progress was the most common reason for transfer to a hospital. Other reasons included desire for pain relief, fetal distress, malpresentation, and maternal exhaustion. This study found that almost 90% of women who planned to deliver at home at the onset of labor were successful. Of those who transferred to the hospital, about 94% were still able to have a spontaneous natural birth. Only 5% of women in the study ended up having a C-section. And this statistic includes almost 1,100 women who attempted natural birth after previously having a cesarean. 87% of those women were able to have a natural birth. The authors of this study compare their results to other studies where intended delivery location was identified. They concluded that low-risk women in this sample experienced high rates of normal physiological birth and very low rates of operative birth and intervention, with no concomitant increase in adverse effects, meaning that for low-risk women, there is no greater risk in having a planned home birth than a planned hospital birth. Okay, let's look at the WAX study, and then we'll compare the mortality figures side by side. The WAX study was published in 2010 in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. The study was performed by reviewing data from 12 previously published studies. The original studies were done between 1976 and 2006, and they took place in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Sweden, the Netherlands, Australia, and Switzerland. Over 500,000 women in total are included in this review. However, over 480,000 Dutch women were in a single study. Keep this number in mind, it'll be important later. According to the WAX study, perinatal mortality was similar by intended delivery location overall, as well as just among non-anomalous offspring. In other words, an infant's mortality risk from the beginning of labor through birth was the same whether they were born at home or in the hospital. However, it goes on to state, in contrast, the overall neonatal death rate was almost twice as high in planned home versus planned hospital births, and almost tripled among non-anomalous neonates. This is where we get that 2 to 3 times more dangerous figure. Now please understand that I believe a single death is a tragedy, whether that's the death of a mother or an infant at any point in the pregnancy or after birth. This is not intended to dismiss those tragedies, but we need to look at the data so that we can understand our actual risk and make an informed decision. Birth statistics are generally reported in X number per 1,000. The MANA study gives us the mortality rate for both the early and late neonatal period. When combined, the neonatal mortality rate for non-anomalous infants is 0.77. This means that less than 1 neonate per 1,000 planned home births would die. The WAX study states that the neonatal mortality rate for non-anomalous infants in a planned home birth is 1.5. In other words, approximately 2 neonates per 1,000 planned home births would die. This is compared to their 0.4 mortality rate for infants in a planned hospital birth. So, with its much greater sample size, the WAX study would seem to be more accurate, right? Well, do you remember all those Dutch women from earlier? The ones who comprised 88% of this study? Surprisingly, the mortality rates for their neonates wasn't included. And I'm not the only one to find this odd. The American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the journal where this study was published, was inundated with letters to the editor regarding the WAX study. Among them was one titled, Home Birth Meta-Analysis, Does It Meet AJOG's Reporting Requirements? The author stated, the meta-analysis includes poor quality studies, has a high risk of methods bias, and does not meet the journal's requirement to comply with meta-analysis of observational studies in epidemiology guidelines. Most importantly, it concludes, we identified 8 studies that had data on overall neonatal mortality rates, not 7. We also identified several different definitions of neonatal death in the included studies. Some studies used the same definition as the authors, but others did not. If WAX had contacted the authors of the very large Dutch study and included their neonatal mortality data, then no difference in neonatal mortality rates would have been evident. After some back and forth between the readers and the journal, the editors of the journal published their final decision. It states in part that the journal should publish the graphs for each outcome in the study and that no retraction of the article is necessary. So, is home birth safe? Well, the data suggests that for low-risk women, it is. Also, do you think that the 2 to 3 times more dangerous statistic is accurate? I'd really like to know your opinion in the comments below. If you're looking for a midwife, please head over to my website at libertymidwifery.com. Hopefully I've already answered some of your questions. And please subscribe to keep the content coming. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you have an amazing day.